Do you know that feeling when, no matter how much good you do, no one seems to notice? When your kindness goes unnoticed or even becomes a joke? Today, I want to share with you the story of João, a simple man who lives in a village surrounded by mountains. He has a heart of gold and is always willing to help those in need, but it seems like no one around him values it. João faces challenges that test his will to keep being kind in a world that seems not to care. But then, something happens that changes everything. Do you want to find out what it is, and how a simple act of kindness can transform not only his life, but that of an entire community? Stay here with me, because this story will touch your heart and make you think differently about the importance of small gestures. And if you enjoy inspiring stories that make us reflect on life, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any updates. So, grab some popcorn, get comfortable, and come with me on this emotional journey alongside João. I'm sure you'll relate to it and, who knows, be inspired to spread more kindness around. Shall we? Let's dive into João's story. Imagine a young man with bright eyes and an easy smile, living in a small, humble village hidden among green, towering mountains. João didn't have many possessions, but he carried something that money couldn't buy: a heart full of kindness. Every day, he woke up before the sun rose. While most people were still asleep, João was already out in the fields, helping with tasks, even when it wasn't his responsibility. If an elderly lady needed help carrying heavy bags, there he was to lend a hand. If a child fell and scraped their knee, it was João who comforted them and made them laugh again. The people in the village were used to his presence, but they didn't see the true value of his actions. Many accepted his help without even thanking him. Some young people, thinking they were clever, made fun of him behind his back, calling him João the Fool, for being so helpful without expecting anything in return. One day, after a long morning helping with the harvest, João was walking down the main street of the village. As he passed by, he heard muffled laughter. A group of young people was pointing in his direction, whispering and laughing. One of them shouted, "Hey, João, why don't you work for yourself instead of doing everyone else's work? Don't you get tired of being the village fool?" The words hit João like an arrow. He had always believed he was doing the right thing, but at that moment, doubt began to creep into his heart. Was he being naive? Did his kindness have no value at all? With the weight of these questions, João decided to take a break. He left the village, following a path that led to the mountains. The wind blew gently, but it wasn't enough to ease the unease within him. He sat by a stream, watching the water flow, trying to find answers. Meanwhile, not far from there, an elderly man was struggling to fix the broken wheel of his cart loaded with supplies. Sweat dripped down his face, and worry was evident in his expression. João, even absorbed in his own thoughts, noticed the scene from afar. Something within him urged him to get up and go over. "Can I help?" João asked with a shy smile. The elderly man looked surprised but relieved. "I would greatly appreciate it, young man. This stubborn wheel doesn't want to cooperate with me today." Together, they worked hard. The task wasn't easy, but with effort and cooperation, they managed to fix the wheel. At the end, the elderly man introduced himself. "My name is Miguel. Thank you so much for your help. I don't know what I would have done without you." João simply nodded, still carrying that cloud of doubt within him. Miguel noticed the young man's somber expression. "Is something troubling you, my friend?" he asked kindly. And there, under the shade of a large tree, João opened his heart. He shared how he had always tried to do good, but it seemed to have little importance to those around him. He shared the pain of being ridiculed by those he only wanted to help. Miguel listened to every word attentively without interrupting. When João finished, the elderly man took a deep breath and said, "You know, João, your story reminds me a lot of my own youth. Curious, João looked up. Miguel continued. I was also considered naive by many, but one day, lost and hopeless, a humble family took me in and shared the little they had with me. That simple act of kindness changed my life. I decided I wanted to be like them and spread that same kindness throughout the world. João felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Perhaps his kindness had a greater purpose than he had imagined. Come with me, said Miguel. I want to show you something. Intrigued, João accepted the invitation. The two of them travelled to the next town, where Miguel would deliver the supplies he was carrying. The destination. An orphanage full of children eagerly awaiting his arrival. Upon arriving, they were greeted with cheers of joy. The children ran to hug Miguel, who handed out food and gifts he had brought. João watched everything in admiration. The happiness on the faces of those children was contagious. Miguel placed a hand on João's shoulder and said, Do you see how a simple gesture can bring so much joy? Kindness doesn't need to be recognized by everyone to have value. If it touches even one heart, it will have been worth it. Miguel's words echoed within João. He realized that he was not alone in this mission, and that his actions, however small they seemed, had a real impact on people's lives. So, had João finally found the answer he was looking for? How would this experience shape his future choices? Don't go anywhere, because up next we're going to see how this new perspective not only transforms João's life, but also that of the whole village. You won't want to miss the conclusion of this inspiring story. After that day at the orphanage, João felt something inside him had changed. As he walked back to his village, Miguel's words echoed in his mind. Kindness doesn't need to be recognized by everyone to have value. He finally understood that his actions had meaning, even if they weren't immediately valued by those around him. When he returned to the village, the sun was already setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. João decided he would continue to be who he had always been, but now with the certainty that his kindness could indeed make a difference. The next day, he woke up early as usual, but this time there was a new sparkle in his eyes. As he walked down the main street, he saw Mrs. Maria trying to lift a heavy basket of fruit. Without hesitation, he ran to help her. She smiled, surprised, and said, "Thank you, João. You're always so helpful." Further along, he found Mr. Carlos, whose dog had run away. João spent hours helping him search for the animal until they found it stuck in a fence. The gratitude on Mr. Carlos's face was evident. As the days went by, his acts of kindness began to draw attention in a different way. People noticed not only what João did, but how he did it, with joy and without expecting anything in return. Some villagers began to wonder, if João, who has so little, can be so generous, why can't we do the same? One Saturday, a group of young people who had previously mocked João sought him out. One of them, Pedro, approached him somewhat awkwardly and said, "João, we were thinking, would you teach us to help with the community harvest? We think we could be useful." João smiled broadly. "Of course, it'll be great to have more hands to help." That day, they worked together in the fields, laughing and sharing stories. The barrier that had once existed between them seemed to have disappeared. Pedro confessed, "You know, João, I don't think we ever understood you. Sorry for being so harsh." João placed his hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry. The important thing is that we're together now." The news of this unity spread throughout the village. Inspired, other villagers began to participate in collective actions. They organised events to repair houses, shared food with families in need, and created a small community market where everyone contributed and everyone benefited. The village, once marked by indifference, now pulsed with a new spirit of solidarity. Laughter echoed through the streets, and children ran freely, feeling safe and loved. One day, as João sat under a tree, watching people work together, he felt a presence by his side. It was Miguel, who had returned. "I see that the seed we planted has blossomed," Miguel said with a smile. João nodded. "All of this happened because you showed me that kindness has value, even if it's not immediately recognized." Miguel looked deeply into João's eyes. "Actually, João, it was you who transformed this place. Your perseverance and pure heart inspired everyone around you. I just showed you what you already knew, here inside." João reflected on those words. He realized that by staying true to himself, he had sparked a change beyond what he could have imagined. That night, the village organized a celebration. Fireworks lit up the sky, and music and dancing filled the streets. During the festivities, the village elder climbed onto an improvised stage and called for silence. "I'd like to say a few words," he began. "For a long time, we lived isolated, each one for themselves. But thanks to the example of one young man, we rediscovered the value of community and generosity. João, please join us here." Surprised, João stepped onto the stage to warm applause. The elder continued, "On behalf of everyone, we want to thank you for showing us that true wealth lies in sharing and caring for each other." Moved, João replied, "I am just a part of all this. Each of you contributed to making our village what it is today. Thank you for opening your hearts." The celebration continued with even more joy. Miguel watched from a distance, pleased with how things had turned out. Before leaving, he sought out João to say goodbye. "Will you continue helping other communities?" João asked. Miguel smiled. "Yes, that is my mission. But know that I carry with me the inspiration I found here. You showed me that no matter the hardships, it's always worth believing in people." They embraced, and Miguel went on his way, disappearing down the road under the starlight. From that day on, the village continued to prosper. And João, well, he never stopped being that young man with a pure heart. But now, he knew his kindness had the power to transform not only individuals, but entire communities. And so we end João's story, an inspiring example of how we should never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness. Now, I ask you, what small actions can you take today to make a difference in someone's life? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and share it with friends and family. Let's spread this message of hope and kindness together. And to keep following inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any new content. Thank you very much for your company, and see you next time.